Okay, I went over the 30-minute time limit on that previous story, so let's see. Backtrack a little bit so it'll make sense. Let's see now. Something about morale has been reduced. Oh, okay, well, I'll start here. The next arrival of the Scorthians. As the days and weeks and months passed after the attack, life gradually returned to normal. Talk of the hated Scorthians subsided. Morale at the Institute for Scorthian Studies was very low. However, and this I had to deal with on a daily basis. Prior to the attack, all of us at the research center had enjoyed an exceptionally fine sense of teamsmanship and camaraderie, but now a sense of deep hopelessness had overcome many of us. I was involved in a project whose goal was some form of contact with the Scorthians, and from there probably a diplomatic settlement, we would hope. They would leave us alone in exchange for what? We didn't know. Clearly we could not outdo them by any technological means. We could not begin to match their weaponry. We had no choice but to learn how to communicate with them and plead with them to let us live in peace, unmolested, undisturbed. But I hardly think they will wish to treat us as they would one of their own. So far, all of our attempts to contact them have come to nothing. Even our theoretical work has gotten bogged down among the mathematicians, according to persistent rumor. The same folks who usually form the spearhead around here. One day, about 6 months after the attack, we received an unprecedented television broadcast from the Scorthians. The broadcast, which lasted almost 3 hours, gave us a primer for their language. They have known how to speak our language for over 150 years, they told us. Now we must learn theirs. This changed daily life at the Institute dramatically. Unless you happen to be an electrical engineer or a mathematician, then you took a crash course in speaking and writing the Scorthian language. Their alphabet has 32 elements compared to 26 of English and 33 of Russian. The way the sound of some of these linguistic elements are made, as the Scorthians have instructed us to make them, may seem a bit odd. 2 of the elements involve a sound emitted from the middle of the throat, a very guttural sound. 2 more elements are a pair of varied pitch 8th or 16th notes performed as a whistle, a sort of chirp. When the language is successfully spoken, it sounds very strange indeed. My skin crawls every time I hear it. Our world leaders at the United Nations chose someone who'd mastered the Scorthian tongue early on, and they then found growing recognition among the politically savvy. And so we have a man who is going to represent all of humanity to these creatures who now have us very much under their collective thumbs. A question on everyone's mind is, will he simply be a petty stooge, couched by a small but effective team of apparatchiks on how to respond to various questions from the press and the public? Or will he be his own man, and will he be later able to tell us sufficiently well about these hateful beings, what they have done to us, and what they still want from us? And that was the first thing this fellow conveyed after he returned from his visit with the Scorthians. In moments, the surveillance tapes were quickly yet thoroughly analyzed, and they clearly showed the man's translation unit had flashed out of existence and reappeared approximately 1 millisecond later. Scorthian technology of entering and leaving one set of dimensions for another, or just projecting objects in that manner, was truly formidable. The name of the man whose remarks were now being televised across the globe turned out to be James William Cannon, a linguist from Cornell with a trustworthy face. In 3 days, he told all of us he would make another broadcast in which he would describe in clear yet concrete detail just what it is the Scorthians expect from us. Do they merely want to watch everyone on Earth writhe with agonizing uncertainty and terror? Will they ever go away after one of their visits and never return? Could this James Cannon fellow answer these questions? Would he? For the next 3 days, everyone was very tense on tenterhooks. Both my children phoned me to say they would drop over to see us and have dinner. Then they would watch the Cannon broadcast with us. When all this had just started, and once each of them had reached their apartment safely, they entered their own homes ill at ease, they later told me, somewhat surprised and shocked that the key actually worked. The memories each of them had of these apartments, despite their brief tenure, began to tease themselves back into consciousness, helping them to gather glimpses of the past. They drifted back to the university campus carrying only their laptops and a notebook. After several days of wandering throughout the campus, flashes of the buildings and rooms in which their classes had been held appeared to them. In a few more days, they were attending all their courses once again. Yes, on the night of Cannon's nationwide broadcast, our son and daughter came to have dinner. It was cold. It was odd when they had told me what their names were. My son dropped by one night out of the blue just to say hello, and soon after we were all seated in the living room, he said that his name was Eric. We congratulated him for having won back, recovered his name. Both he and his sister had begun to follow the fashion of never carrying any physical ID, which, strictly speaking, is no longer illegal. Eric does this, he told me, for one, merely because it is possible, and for another, because he loves the sense of anonymity it gives him. Eric has never been booked into jail. His fingerprints aren't in the criminal justice system. Only his bank and his cell phone have a file of his thumbprint. A few days later, my daughter dropped by for an evening visit and told me her name was Diane. I hugged her, Lydia, nor I, have ever been able to recall their names. We tried often, but we were never able to do so. Nevertheless, the four of us sat in the living room with the television on, panel discussion underway, the pundits' remarks primarily just guesses as to what news Cannon would bring us. Several minutes passed, then, while still off stage, James Cannon was introduced with a lengthy set of academic accomplishments by the moderator. Cannon then walked on to the studio set wearing a solemn, no-nonsense expression and took a seat at the circular conference table. So, Dr. Cannon, the moderator began, you are now the only human being who has gone to the Scorthian world. We gather you communicated with them at some length. Please, would you give us your impression of them? What did they tell you? From my physical location at the Space Travel Center in Houston, I underwent an atomic decomposition and translation into the set of dimensions they, the Scorthians, inhabit. My body was reconstituted according to their physical laws. The Scorthians have done this with many other species, some even having come from civilizations not unlike our own. To them, my appearance was odd, but not unpleasant. They never know quite what to expect when they perform one of these experiments, these dimensional translation experiments. So I was told. I was advised not to look in a mirror or any type of semi-reflective glass, say, used in a door or a wall. The Scorthians vary in appearance, as do we, but I would say to a further degree. They are bipedal, with an average height of roughly 2.5 meters, about the height of a standing Kodiak grizzly bear. But instead of the fearsome aspect you might have expected, they all wear bland expressions to hide what they are thinking. They have spoken and unspoken forms of communication. And when I say unspoken, I am not referring to a language of hand gestures or sign language. I found myself standing in a cavernous assembly hall. The floor was made of some type of hexagonal shaped material, similar to granite, perhaps. Some of the Scorthians were standing, some were seated. They were holding vigorous discussions with one another. A few of them stood alone and proclaimed their views with a fervor even their placid exteriors could not conceal. Suddenly the lights in the assembly hall grew dim, and then a moment later a spotlight illuminated a single Scorthian wearing a dark purple cape. This fellow lifted one of his 4 thin arms and said, "We have the creature from Earth with us today." Then he reverted to his own language. I may have been an emissary, but I wasn't a guest. Soon he looked at me directly and took a few steps toward me and said, "We have invaded your world 5 times now. After we have gone, you are like helpless infants as you try to get everything all sorted. Why are you kind doing this to us? Clearly you Scorthians have gone to much trouble to torment the human population of Earth. Why do you do this to us? Until 200 years ago, you humans took great pleasure and satisfaction in believing that you were the most clever and most powerful beings in existence. And ever since your first contact with us, we have shown you, reminded you, this is not so. Do you intend to go on attacking Earth as you have done, indefinitely? For the next few centuries, no. We, the Scorthians, as you call us, are done with all that for the time being. We have studied your changing civilizations for several thousand years now, but only recently have you really begun to interest us. We still regard you as primitive beings, you see. After that, I was sent back. I believed the Scorthian when he told me that we would no longer be attacked. They have lost interest with us, and they seem to be in search of a worthy opponent. And most thankfully, we humans do not fit that bill. Good night, everyone.